we are just getting to the end of this, which we started talking about where this story begun, right? We started by talking about that question that remained in my mind of like, what are the positive attributes of Qatari leadership and why are we not talking about them? But as we start engaging in this question, I want to ask you a question. What shapes reality? Do I have my PowerPoint up? Thank you. So, what shapes our reality? Is it what we choose to see or what we choose to ignore? Both. The challenge for us is our attention capacity is limited. It's actually, if we were to calculate it in bytes, it would be very, very small. So our brain has to select where it's looking for. What is it going to actually engage that level of attention? The science around attention is quite revealing. Because if you stop for a minute, there's a lot going on here. There are sounds, there are textures, there are smells that are going on. And maybe you are not stopping to think about them until I started to mention. Because your attention is either maybe in the words that I'm speaking or maybe in the clinging of the plates back there. But it's not actually divided. We can't actually multitask. We can switch, but not multitask. As you can see from the video, it might be that we think we know what we're looking at, but then another perspective will reveal something else. It's interesting because the science around attention and focus is quite fascinating. The researchers in the University of California talk about how we actually don't engage with reality, we build reality. Our brain, actually, based on what it's focused on, it's going to create neural pathways that is going to actually help us recognize patterns like that again and again and again and again. So imagine that you are used to focusing on types of stimuli that are coming at you, and that's where your attention normally goes. And so you have strong neural pathways around those things, and that's why you always go back there. So knowing that what we notice creates that reality, also what we notice and what we focus on expands in our awareness. So quite literally, what we focus on becomes bigger. So if I focus on problems, what becomes bigger? Problems. If I focus on strengths, what becomes bigger? Strengths. So I'm giving you just a little bit of a background as to why is Roberta asking these questions about Qatari leaders? It's not out of, she just want to put a glaze of positivity over everything. No, there is actually a strong science around it. We find what we're looking for. And that is our reality. But I want to encourage us to kind of flip the script a little bit. So let's take this to leadership. Imagine that we are, as a leader, we kind of are wired to some degree to have a deficit mindset. Let me look what's wrong. Let me fix what's wrong. A lot of times we think, as a leader, I have to be the fixer. And what do we find when we are looking for problems to fix? More problems to fix. But what if you shifted and you started looking for what's right? What is working well in my organization? Who are the people that are excelling beyond same context, same resources, but these people just seem to thrive no matter? What if we started paying attention to those types of realities? Because those realities are happening at the same time as the problems that we identify are happening. The challenge is, though, that nowadays a lot of people think of the word positive as positivity, positive vibes only. And as a researcher, that kind of gets on my nerves a little bit, because there is so much science around positive leadership, positive psychology. And it's not just about this blind optimism. Let's just pretend we don't have problems. It's quite the opposite. The idea here is to really dig deep into what makes the positive positive. And in the science, especially the science of positive psychology and positive leadership, we look at the positive as something that is desired, but that what the value that it adds to today does not diminish the future value. Translating that means if I actually want to engage in something good, it cannot cost tomorrow's possibility of good. So let's say I love chocolate, which is a reality. You all got some chocolate over there, and I'm jealous because I don't have one. But if I engage in really enjoying that chocolate all the time, I am sacrificing the good later, because that's going to make me sick eventually. So it's not sustainable. So when we talk about sustainability, the positive sustainability is when it's sustainable for that person in terms of time. It's good for me now, and it's going to be good for me later. It's not going to actually affect the sustainability of my integrity and well-being. It needs to be sustainable across people. So not just it's good for me, but bad for them. That is not positive. Yeah? And it needs to be positive across systems. So not just for us over here, good not just for Qatar, good for Qatar and for the rest of the world. That is truly what positive is when we're talking about the science of positive psychology and positive leadership. Another concept that we take from positive leadership is a concept called positive deviance. I don't know about you, but for me, the first time I hear the word deviance, what does it come to mind? Is it something positive? Not usually, right? Deviance, we think somebody's doing something wrong. What is positive deviance? Positive deviance are those positive outliers. So when we study organizations that excel in all sorts of areas, including the human factor, they are extremely well, like off the charts in their results, in their retention, in all the metrics that an organization cares about. Those are the positive deviant organizations. The same goes for the positive deviant individual that is in your teams, in your organization. Cultures and group cultures, because I think of culture as more than just a nationality. We create culture in every group that we are a part of. So like Marco said, we are always doing the work of building culture and creating culture. But here in positive leadership, when we talk about positive deviance, we're trying to identify what is the phenomenon that we need to study. So instead of studying what's wrong and how do I fix it, we study what is that outlier that is incredibly outperforming everybody else? What makes them be that outlier? What makes them be so incredibly, performing so incredibly well, despite of the environment being the same for everybody, right? So that is what we study. We study what's going well. So think of it in the context of an organization. How many of your organizations conduct exit interviews? Okay, I thought it was more. Most organizations do, or wish they did, right? In those exit interviews, what are we finding? We find what makes people leave. But do we actually conduct staying interviews? Some people do, not the norm though, right? The norm is the exit interview to find out what's wrong. The stay interview is to find out what is keeping the people that are staying here, and how do we amplify that? How do we make that bigger? So that's why we need to identify what are those phenomena and how do we multiply. Another one quickly that I want to mention is the heliotropic effect. How many of you have heard of this word before? Okay, just a few. That's what I expected. It's kind of a big word. But the heliotropic effect is there for every living thing. Every living thing is attracted to its source of life. So for a plant, that is light. But think about it. The best working environments, the best leaders you've had, how did they make you feel? What did they do to you that made you want to deliver more? They were sources of life for you. And so that heliotropic effect doesn't happen only in nature, it happens for us, humans, as well. It's there everywhere. So if we create organizations that are actually sources of life for individuals, what is going to happen? They're going to thrive. And that is what we want through the practice of positive leadership. I'm not going to go into details and bore you with all the numbers of the research, but I do want to talk about what are the strengths that we found in Qatar and in Qatari leaders. It was probably one of the greatest honors of my life to sit down with incredible leaders in this country and to hear the stories of what is it that they do well from their own perspective. Not from the perspective of an outsider, but from a perspective of an internal perspective. So one thing that was incredible was the bold vision and optimism. So in positive leadership, we talk about bold vision as Everest goals. So they are the size of an Everest. They seem impossible. But then with optimism, and optimism in this case means the belief that things are going to work out. Optimism is not naivete that just thinks everything is great. Optimism in the science is the belief that things are going to work out and that we have the resources to make it work. And so think about it from the story of a World Cup. We now have post-World Cup. So for us, it happened. But think about it 12, 14 years ago when Qatar won that bid. What? The fact that a small country even attempted for that at that time in history was incredible. But you know, the World Cup was not the end goal. The end goal is to be a voice in the world stage with credibility. The World Cup, as big as it seemed, it was not the biggest goal or the biggest dream. That's what I found over and over again with Qatari leaders that I interview. The boldness of their dreams and their visions, and the optimism to actually make that happen, and the belief that this is going to work out. Another thing that kind of falls in this category is the foresight, the ability to anticipate opportunities, to see that there's an opportunity 15 years ahead, and to start building towards that from now. That is also very, very typical from the research. Another thing that is fascinating, at least to me it was, to see the power of that national identity. We think national identity, I don't know about you, but if I hear that word, I think pride, right? But here it's slightly different. What I found in the research is that power of national identity is a force of purpose and meaning for the Qatari leaders. To the degree that is probably one of my favorite stories in the research. I interviewed somebody that worked with a team that did all the translation work for the World Cup. And there was in the news all over not this photo, but another photo of a blind man saying, "Thank you, Qatar, because you made the blind see." And when I talked to the leader, what she loved about it, about that picture, it hangs on her wall in the office, wasn't the fact that her organization was recognized, or herself and her initiative. She said, "What makes me happy about this is that my country is being honored because of the effort that my team and I did." And that is incredible. She said it literally. It wasn't Qatar Foundation. It wasn't the university. It was Qatar. And that goes from the big things like that to another leader I talked to that talked about the initiative of working the system to make sure there was a bus stop in front of this new hospital in a remote area of Qatar. And as he talked about this bus stop, all of a sudden his body language shifted and he's just like chest puffed up and proud. And I asked him, I was like, "I'm noticing you're proud." Like there was a sense of joy. Something is happening in there. He's like, "Well, because if now we have this new bus stop here, that means my community and my country is better." So it's an incredible force to actually derive meaning and purpose and bring it to what I do, small or big in scale, which is incredible. My country, I never heard anybody saying, "Oh, I did this to make Brazil proud." No, maybe my family, max, not to make my country proud. So this is very unique and special about Qatari leadership. Another thing that was quite interesting was in a style of decision-making that was consultative, meaning, which is right there in the system of government, shura, taking counsel, actually going to the broader community for wisdom. And here it was interesting because I didn't see evidence of going to the team necessarily, but to the wider community, maybe elders, maybe peers, but not necessarily to the team. So it was an interesting factor that I wish I could investigate a little further, because I would love to know what is there. Is it because of the shared values? I don't know. It's a little bit beyond the scope of this research, but it got me curious to study more. And then finally, respect as a foundation. In positive leadership, we talk about positive relationships. And step number one, or metric number one, is respectful engagement. And for Qatari leaders, that first encounter, the fact that we say good morning, the fact that we greet each other, the fact that we host each other. I was observing every time a leader had to leave, because they have other commitments, the director of the museum would accompany them. Because in Qatari culture, that type of escorting and hosting and greeting is very important. It is a sense of respect for that person, to honor that person in this context. So that was very strong, where people would acknowledge that good leaders are the leaders that greet you in the elevator. And I thought it was fascinating, because for me, that's a given, right? But that was a sign of someone that actually engages with me, and that was incredible. So these are some of the things that we found, not all of the things. But to leave us with a challenge today, I want to ask you to try something for me or for yourself. As you become a ripple of positive impact, I want to ask you to take these 3 questions this week and try to practice this week and next week. So, question number 1, as I look around in my organization, what's working extraordinarily well in my team or in my organization or my family, community? What is going well? Notice, what are the beautiful things around you? Build those neural pathways. Who demonstrated excellence yesterday, and how can I celebrate it? Sometimes we only pay attention to the mistakes, and we fail to celebrate the wins and the excellence. Notice and celebrate it. How can I amplify those bright spots that I saw? How can I amplify them today? I want you to take these questions, and for the next 7 days, ask yourself those questions and start thinking about and start noticing how you shift and how you're gonna start noticing more things. And all of a sudden, you're gonna see it everywhere because that's what you're looking for. Shift the focus, you will shift your reality. Your leadership is your legacy. The imprint that you leave in somebody, that is your legacy. People one day or another will move on from under your leadership. Are they going to remember you as someone that was the source of sun and the source of life for them? Or are they going to remember you as someone they're like, okay, those are the lessons I don't want to repeat. That is my negative example, anything but that, right? Remember, we want to be the launching pad for people. We want to be that our positive ripple, our positive impact is living on, and people years to come will remember the impact we had on them and in helping them grow. I don't know about you, but as I engage with people, the best leaders are the ones that have had somebody else believe in them. Somebody else said, I believe in you and I'm going to support you in becoming this person that I see you could become. So be that for people. And finally, today is not the end. It's just the beginning. We want to have this be a movement in which we are actually taking some of these principles from positive leadership, from Qatari leadership, and we move into the future of a more human-centric leadership in Qatar. This is my link tree. I just want to point out some resources that you're going to find there. But also, I want to ask you to join us in our community. So first, newsletter, and then I wrote a more readable version of the research, and you're going to find that there, Positive Leadership in Qatar report. It's not the 80 pages that got submitted to the university, so you're welcome. And then I want to invite you, if you really are passionate and believe that we can make a difference in this country and in this region, I want to invite you to join the Positive Impact community, so that we keep this conversation going, and it doesn't take, a yearly meeting to talk about it, but we keep it going and keep it alive in our organizations. Then join the LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube, just to keep following this theme and this topic as we keep this conversation. And we come to a thank you. Thank you. The world isn't waiting for you to fix what's broken. It's looking for you to amplify what is extraordinary. Thank you.